The prairie woke in silence, the kind that presses against the ribs and slows a man's breath. Morning light spilled across the field, the air still cool before the sun could bake the earth into its usual harshness. Dust drifted lazy in the wind, and somewhere a lone hawk circled, its shadow skimming the dry grass. I remember it, as if the day still lingers beneath my eyelids, the way her cry broke that silence, carrying further than the wind. Please, help me. The sound was not of weakness, but of a soul clinging to the last thread of hope. I turned, and there she was, bound to the timber frame like some offering the town had chosen to abandon. Her skin was smudged with dirt, her lips cracked, but her eyes, those eyes were fierce, as if daring the world not to look away. Her name was Clara May Whitfield. Folks spoke of her as if she were trouble wrapped in a skirt, though what they feared was not her sins, but the truths she carried. Accused of stealing from the townsfolk, she was set up by the very man who claimed to protect us, Sheriff Ezekiel Crow. He had that kind of power, the kind that pressed down on men's throats until they forgot how to speak. I stood not far, hat low over my brow. My name's Silas Boone, a rancher who knew silence better than most. I had lost a wife once to fever, and to the cruelty of neighbors who turned their backs when help was needed most. Since then, my voice had been buried under the weight of grief, a man who worked his cattle and spoke only when necessary. But that morning, when Clara's voice cracked against the air, I felt the earth beneath me stir as though silence itself had grown restless. The town gathered at first, the way they always did when judgment was to be paraded. Men stood with folded arms, women whispered behind hands, and children peeked between skirts, eyes wide with curiosity. They did not shout, nor did they comfort. They simply watched, the way one watches fire consume a barn when there is no will to fetch water. Clara bore their stares with chin high, though her arms trembled against the ropes. "Sheriff says she took what weren't hers," a man muttered near me. But his voice carried the tone of someone repeating a script he no longer believed. Sheriff Crow himself stood tall in his badge and pride, telling the crowd she'd pay for her crime. What he didn't say was that the missing cattle had found their way into his own corral, ledger altered by his hand. He wore his silence as armor, and most of us lacked the courage to pierce it. But when the sun slid low and shadows stretched long, the crowd dissolved like smoke on the wind. Only Clara remained, bound and weary, the wood frame creaking as the night breeze passed. I lingered, boots heavy in the dust, torn between the habit of turning away and the stirring that gnawed at me. I stepped forward, holding out a tin cup filled with water. She eyed it, suspicion flickering before need overcame pride. I raised it to her lips. The water spilled more than it touched, but she drank, and in that act, something unspoken passed between us. Her voice rasped, but carried strength. "You think silence will save you, rancher?" I swallowed hard, unable to meet her gaze. I had lived long in the shadow of my silence, believing it spared me grief. But as I watched her chest heave against the ropes, I wondered if silence was just another kind of death. She lifted her chin despite her pain. "If truth dies in silence, then so do we." The words stuck to me like burrs to a horse's mane. I left her there, the night closing in, stars breaking through the velvet dark. My boots carried me away, but her voice followed, echoing louder than the hawk's cry, louder than the whispers of the town. The West was built on silence, I thought, but silence was also where truth went to rot. And in that thought, I knew a reckoning was drawing near. The sun rose hard and merciless, laying its weight across the prairie. By the second day, Clara's lips were bloodied from the dry air, her body slack against the ropes. Each hour she endured seemed less like punishment and more like defiance itself. I carried her image in my chest like a coal that burned hotter with every step I took away from her. I worked the ranch as if routine might drown it out, mending a fence, leading the herd, but the silence would not leave me be. Every nail driven felt like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Every hoof strike on dry soil echoed her words. If truth dies in silence, then so do we. That night, when the town turned its eyes to whiskey and weary beds, I returned. She looked smaller in the moonlight, but her gaze held me still. I knelt, held bread wrapped in cloth. She would not take it at first. Pride, sharper than hunger. Only when I left it at her feet did she relent, breaking it with trembling hands. "You'll make yourself a target," she whispered. "Already am," I muttered, loosening the ropes at her wrists just enough for blood to flow again. She exhaled sharp, a sound between relief and pain. We did not speak further, but there was a weight in her eyes that felt like trust being born. So it went, night after night. A cup of water, a blanket against the cold. I'd adjust the knots, not enough to free her, but enough to ease the bite of rope against skin. She began to ask of my past in fragments, as if she knew I carried more ghosts than cattle. I told her of Anna, my wife, who fever took while the town watched with folded arms. Clara did not pity me. Instead, she said, "You loved once. That's more than most men dare." Her words carved something open. I began to see that all the years of silence had not been peace, but cowardice. Sheriff Crow had plans of his own. On the fourth day, he gathered the town again. His voice rang loud as he declared Clara would be moved, tried in a far-off city where no defense could follow her. His smirk told me the journey would never be seen through. That morning, I woke knowing silence could no longer serve me. I gathered scraps of evidence, cattle brands burned off, a ledger page Crow had carelessly tossed in the saloon fire, half burnt but legible still. Small pieces, yet enough to paint the truth if laid bare. When the town gathered, dust rising around boots and skirts, I stepped forward. My voice felt brittle, but once it broke the air, it grew steady. "She ain't the thief," I said. "It's Crow. His cattle pens are fattened with what's been stolen from you. I've seen it with my own eyes." Gasps rippled. Then silence fell harder than before. Crow's gaze cut like a blade, daring me to keep on. My hands shook, but I raised the charred ledger page. "Here's his writing." "His crime." The crowd shifted uneasily. A widow near the back spoke first. "My boy went hungry last winter while Crow's table never emptied." Another voice followed, a shopkeeper recalling debts Crow never paid. One by one, the silence cracked until it broke altogether, voices rising like a storm. Crow's hand fell to his gun. I moved without thinking, stepping in front of Clara, shielding her with nothing but my chest. The world slowed, the creak of leather, the metallic whisper as iron left its holster. I thought then of Anna and of Clara's eyes that had learned to trust me. A shot rang out. I braced for pain, but it wasn't me who fell. It was Crow. Smoke curled from the barrel of a pistol held by the blacksmith, a quiet man who had lost a brother to Crow's schemes. The sheriff staggered, disbelief in his eyes before the dust swallowed him. For a moment, no one moved. Then the ropes were cut, Clara stumbling into the open, her arms trembling but her head high. She did not weep. She walked forward as if each step reclaimed the ground beneath her. I offered her my arm, not as savior but as equal. She took it, and together we left the frame behind. The town did not cheer. They bowed their heads as if shame itself had weight. But in their silence there was no longer fear. Only the slow, painful birth of truth. Clara and I did not speak of what came next. We did not need to. In the brush of her hand against mine as we crossed the field, I felt the shape of something new. Not romance declared, but the seed of connection, patient and steady, waiting for its season to bloom. I look back now and see the moment as more than one woman freed, more than one man breaking his silence. It was a reckoning, the kind that comes not with bullets or fire, but with voices rising at last. Sometimes all it takes is one voice to unbury 1,000 truths. Sometimes all it takes is one act of courage to set the prairie singing again. And if you, reader, find yourself bound by fear, remember this: dignity waits for the moment you choose to speak. Silence may feel safe, but it is truth, spoken aloud, that sets us free.